What would happen if all the undocumented immigrants in New York State just suddenly disappeared? New York State has 700,000 undocumented people living in the state. Long Island has 100,000 people. These are obviously estimates and based on survey data, but New York has one of the largest undocumented immigrant populations in the country. They're a huge part of our local and state economy, and so it would have massive disruptions if they suddenly all got deported or disappeared. We would have labor shortages in certain sectors that are particularly reliant on undocumented labor. So think construction, hospitality, agriculture, food service, and other like domestic work. We that would lead to the disappearance of these people would lead to both labor shortages, increased wages for documented people, legal people, and higher prices for all of us. Especially in those industries. So let's talk through my industry, particularly the construction industry, especially in residential. The industry relies heavily on undocumented labor, skilled and unskilled. The industry is at a moment where there's immense labor shortages to begin with. And so if there was a removal of the undocumented pool, you would see even higher prices in residential building and construction. The costs in general would just skyrocket. In addition, these undocumented people obviously live in housing, so the housing that they live in, those people would the owners of the units would obviously then need to go find other tenants and other people to live in the buildings, and so that would lead to a massive disruption. Obviously, it would also reduce the amount of competition for affordable housing because so many of the people who are in affordable housing are undocumented. In the agricultural and food industries, you would see massive disruptions and higher pricing, especially in upstate New York. There is a large agricultural business sector, and so much of that is reliant on undocumented labor, and so you would see an increase in food prices in the state. You'd also see massive tax loss revenue. Undocumented workers pay billions in taxes, and so for state and local governments, you would see real tax law. So that comes in terms of state taxes, property taxes, payroll taxes for those who have ITIN numbers. But you would see, you'd obviously see like with those billions of dollars being lost, you'd also see impacts to public funding. The service industry in general would collapse, right? So like restaurants, hotels, cleaning companies, these companies are dominated by undocumented labor. And so you'd see service shutdowns and service closures. People would maybe have to have different operating hours. It would lead to mass vacancy of the work. People who are legally here but want to work, the documented unemployed would see a benefit to the disappearance of 700,000 people, right? So like if you're legal here but you're struggling to find work, those jobs that are currently being filled by undocumented people, it would be a benefit to them. You would see a real political fallout from this. Business owners who rely on undocumented labor would lobby for immigration reform, guest worker permits, because they rely on this labor. You'd have real social upheaval from this labor crisis. It's something to think about, right? There's obviously has been an increase in undocumented people in New York State over the last few years.